Friends, today we are going to dive into one of the most crucial shifts happening in geopolitics, the deepening relationship between India and the European Union. The headline might sound diplomatic and even a little predictable: trade, security, new levels of ties. But beneath these words lies a story of strategy, opportunity, competition, and the reshaping of the global order. When Prime Minister Narendra Modi says India is ready for the next level in ties with the European Union, he is not simply making a polite statement for the cameras. He is signaling that India and Europe are preparing to redefine their relationship in ways that could impact not just their two regions, but the entire world. Why does this matter? Because we are living in an era where old alliances are shifting, where the United States no longer dominates the global economy the way it once did, where China is rising but also facing resistance, and where middle powers like India and blocs like the European Union are stepping forward to shape the next phase of international politics. The India-EU partnership sits at the heart of this transformation. Trade is the lifeblood of the connection, but it is far more than just trade. It is also about security, energy, technology, climate, and above all, the desire to create balance in a world that feels increasingly unstable. Let us begin with trade, the most obvious pillar of the relationship. For years, India and the EU have been negotiating a free trade agreement, one that has been stuck in bureaucratic and political deadlocks. But now, there is a sense of urgency on both sides. Europe sees India as the fastest-growing large economy, with a massive market of 1.4 billion people, a booming middle class, and a country that is pushing forward on digitalization, infrastructure, and manufacturing. For Europe, which is trying to reduce its overdependence on China for supply chains, India represents both an opportunity and a necessity. India, on the other hand, sees Europe as a source of advanced technology, investment, and high-value markets for its exports. The EU is already India's third-largest trading partner. And with a serious trade deal, that relationship could multiply many times over. But trade negotiations are never easy. The EU often emphasizes labor standards, environmental rules, and intellectual property protection. India, on the other hand, pushes for easier access for its goods, especially textiles, agricultural products, and services. There is also the question of data Europe, as strict data privacy rules often clash with India's ambitions in digital services. Yet despite these challenges, both sides recognize the strategic importance of moving forward. Why? Because the alternative, staying stuck only, strengthens China's grip on global trade networks. For Europe, diversifying toward India is a hedge against Beijing. For India, closer trade with Europe is a hedge against overdependence on the US market. This is not just economics, it is geopolitics in action. Now let us move to security. The EU traditionally has been seen as more of an economic bloc than a hard power. But the world has changed. The Ukraine war forced Europe to think about security in a way it had not done for decades. Energy security, defense industries, cybersecurity all suddenly became top priorities. And when Europeans look toward the Indo-Pacific, they see both opportunities and threats. They see the world's busiest sea lanes, which carry the trade on which European economies depend. They also see China's aggressive moves in the South China Sea, the militarization of islands, and the potential threat to freedom of navigation. And who is the key player in that region? India. For the EU, India is not just another partner, it is the anchor of the Indo-Pacific. That is why European navies are increasingly participating in exercises in the Indian Ocean. That is why the EU has adopted its own Indo-Pacific strategy, where India is central. And that is why defense cooperation, intelligence sharing, maritime security dialogues are now on the table between India and Europe. For India, European support adds legitimacy to its own vision of a free and open Indo-Pacific, one where no single power dominates. It also gives India the flexibility to balance between the US and Europe, strengthening its role as a pivot power in Asia. But security cooperation is not just about navies and military talks. It is also about energy, cyber, and technology. Europe wants to work with India on renewable energy, especially green hydrogen, an area where both have big ambitions. Europe is a leader in climate technologies. India is one of the largest markets for renewable deployment. If they combine forces, they can lead the global green transition. Cybersecurity is another frontier. Both sides are concerned about cyber access, disinformation, and technology theft, much of which is linked to authoritarian states. Cooperation in this field can strengthen both democracies against threats that go beyond physical warfare. Another critical aspect of India-EU relations is strategic autonomy. Europe, after Ukraine, has realized it cannot depend entirely on the US for security. It needs its own independent capabilities. India has long practiced strategic autonomy, refusing to become a pawn in any bloc. This common outlook makes their partnership natural. Both want to engage with multiple players. Both want a multipolar world where power is not concentrated in one or two capitals. This philosophical alignment underpins the growing ties. Of course, challenges remain. Europe worries about India's continued energy trade with Russia, even under sanctions. India, meanwhile, sees Europe as sometimes too close to Washington's line, especially on issues like human rights and climate commitments. But despite these differences, the trajectory is clear. Both need each other more than ever before. The symbolism of Prime Minister Modi saying India is ready for the next level of ties is not just rhetoric. It is a signal that India is willing to elevate the relationship beyond words and into concrete actions. A free trade deal, joint investments in clean energy, more naval exercises, deeper technology cooperation. These are all on the horizon. For Europe, partnering with India is a way to stay relevant in the Indo-Pacific, to secure its supply chains, and to align with a major democracy. For India, deepening ties with Europe gives it leverage against both China and the United States, while also opening new avenues for growth. Think of the global map today. On one side, you have the US-China rivalry dominating headlines. On another, you have Russia pushing back against Western sanctions and reshaping its own alliances. In this environment, India and the EU working together represents the rise of a new axis of stability. It is not an alliance in the military sense, but it is a powerful partnership of democracies, economies, and societies that want to shape the future, not just react to others. This is why trade and security dominate the agenda. Trade provides the foundation, the economic muscle. Security provides the trust and the strategic bond. Together, they make the partnership resilient. And as both sides face challenges, whether it is economic slowdown in Europe or border threats from China for India, they will look to each other for support. The world is watching. Will India and the EU finally close the free trade agreement that has been in talks for more than a decade? Will they align more deeply on Indo-Pacific strategies? Will they overcome differences on Russia, on climate, on market access? The answers will define not just bilateral ties, but the shape of global geopolitics in the 2020s and beyond. So when you hear headlines about Modi saying India is ready for the next level of ties with the EU, remember, it is not just about trade talks or polite diplomacy. It is about the strategic dance of two major players stepping closer together. Driven by necessity, by opportunity, and by the shared understanding that in today's uncertain world, no country, no region can afford to stand alone. Together, India and the European Union are preparing to write a new chapter in global affairs. Whether it becomes a story of true partnership or one of missed opportunities depends on the choices they make in the coming years. That, my friends, is why this moment is historic. The India-EU partnership is not just a bilateral relationship. It is a pillar of the emerging world order, where trade and security are two sides of the same coin, and where cooperation across continents defines the balance of power for decades to come.